G'day everybody, it's Matt here from Matt Carves. So today I'm going to carve this seafaring guy, and he's got a nice wooden hat on, nice beard and hair, and have a few problems with it, the eyes mainly actually. So I'm starting here with a square block of wood. Now this wood is called Remu. It's a New Zealand wood. It's probably the equivalent of maybe cherry in hardness, and it burns quite easily. I always tend to go in and put on the nose first, and then sort of like go from the size of the nose and put on the eyes in relationship to it. That's the way I approach things. It's not the only way of carving a face, but I think everybody kind of develops their own kind of way. So yeah, so here I'm just putting in the nose. I'm sort of like going deep, so that's the bridge at the top, and the bottom is the tip. If you have any problems with sort of proportions, I've put in a video and I'll link it sort of up in the right hand corner, so you can sort of see how I put in the proportions for this. You can see me there. I'm just putting in the center line and sort of the outside of the nose, and we can work from that. So I'm going to sort of like start putting in the nose here, just starting to form it. And the top there where I'm putting in the burr is sort of like the deepest point where the eyes sort of meet the nasal kind of part, if you get what I mean. I don't tend to put deep channels in where the eyes are. I tend to like to leave a little bit of wood there, just so I've got stuff to play with for the eyes. And I've gone to the fine taper burr from Cutzel, and so I'm just forming like the shape of the nose. Sort of I go in and I sort of like form sort of like a channel down the nose, and then I will separate out the nostrils at the end a little bit later on. So you can sort of see me there, just sort of like starting to separate those nostrils. Trying to work out where they're going to go, probably a little bit lower maybe. And sort of refining the eyes a little bit there. So I'm sort of like leaving a lot of wood to play with there. And sort of like drawing it in where things are going to kind of go. So drawing in his mustache there and his sort of beard as well. Yeah. And just sort of at these beginning stages, you just want to try and get sort of like the proportions right and sort of see how it's going to form. Might add a little bit of shape to the mustache there. Okay, so sort of finding up those lines in the eye, just trying to figure out where they're going to go. Trying to keep each eye kind of similar. I always make the mistake of doing one eye completely in any other eye, and I think I did it in this one eventually as well. So, and I'm trying to sort of like work out where those bags are going to go under the eye as well. It's just sort of redefining things. And I think in these beginning stages of the carving, you sort of want to sort of like really look carefully and try and work out proportions. I'm just putting in sort of like the sides of the faces here. I'm not quite sure whether I'm going to make the sculpture or carving or whatever you want to call it, whether I'm going to make it within the block or outside the block, if you get what I mean. So sort of going back to those eyes, sort of just putting in a point there where I think the middle of the pupil should go, and just kind of looking at that and sort of roughing in a little bit with the upper eyelid, just trying to get a sense of where things go. And I want to, so I've swapped over burrs there to a cutter burr, and just sort of like fining up the lines and making the upper lid a little bit smoother. So when we put in the line to define the upper lid, we don't have to go back. Well, you can do. I always refine things afterwards anyway, but I try and make things a little bit smoother, so I can sort of like, maybe if I want to draw in the lines on the eye, I will do that as well. So it's always easier if the carving is smoother to do that. Okay, so now I've changed over to that burr there. I call it the mushroom burr. It's probably called something completely different, but that's what I call it anyway. So I'm just putting in the definition of the top of the eyelid, and you sort of want to look at reference photos on how to do this. I sort of put it in, and then I might alter it a little bit, sort of change the angles as I go along just to see what looks good. And so I don't tend to go in really, really deep really quickly. I sort of like sketch it in and sort of like and ah over it, and sort of take it from there. Yeah, so no, by no means am I a fast carver. I just sort of like go along and I try and do the best I can, and sometimes I have to change things, and that's okay. So I'm sort of, I'm just sort of like trying to get, when I'm looking at this eye, sorry, I keep on changing my train of thought here. When I'm kind of looking at this eye, I'm sort of like referencing it to the nose, and I feel the nose is slightly a little bit too wide at the moment, so I'm going to narrow that down, so that'll make the eyes seem a little bit bigger. Just sort of like looking at the profiles there. It's a real sort of game of sort of like keep on looking at different angles of it, and you sort of want to make the eyeball actually round, not sort of like oval in shape, if you get what I mean. So a lot of eyeballs, like it's quite flat there, but as I go along I will make it more extreme on the edges, sort of going back, so it's more of a sphere. And now I am looking at doing the lower eyelid, and I sort of want to leave, I don't want to go really deep here because I want to leave room to put those sort of eye bags underneath as well. So I'm just sort of like putting it in. I'm not really happy with the shape at the moment. It looks really odd, but that's okay because like it's all about refining the eye as you go along. Okay, so I've swapped back to that taper burr as well, putting in a few more, trying a little bit more depth on the underneath of the eye. It's not working out that well, this eye, to be honest. I'm not quite sure what's wrong with it yet. I'm going to finish it off and I'm going to see what it kind of looks like, and then I might remake it. Right, I'm just going to critique this little bit of work that I've done here, just to see what I need to do. Sort of, this eye is a little bit shallow. I kind of want it deeper. It kind of looks a little bit small as well. I'm going to try and fix that up. Not quite sure how I'm going to do that, but I think we'll go in there and make that deeper there, and maybe go in a little bit deeper here. Maybe try and bring that eye out a little bit further, and try and round that up a bit. It's kind of a little bit flat, so I'll probably try and leave this and carve these two sides. Okay, so I think this eye is looking a lot better than the other one, but it still needs a lot of redefining. I like to sort of make that lower eyelid sort of like tuck under the upper eyelid. Not necessary, lots of people don't have that going on, but I think it looks quite good. So what we will do over the course of the rest of the carving is just define that eye in relation to the cheek and the nose. I'm going to thin down that nose too because it's too big for the eyes, especially the nasal parts sticking out there. They're going out too wide, so I want to bring those in quite a bit. And what I'm doing here is I'm just rounding the eye out, so I'm just sort of like taking each corner back a little bit further so it's more round over the horizontal part of it, sort of like going a little bit deeper within the eyelids, so it sits better in there. It's looking pretty good now. I'm not sure how you guys carve, but I'm extremely slow. It's just the way it kind of goes. But I really enjoy like tiny little details like this and spending the time getting it right. I'm not an expert in any of these, so what I'm saying is essentially how I carve it. And what I'm doing here is I am going to cut this carving in half, and I'm using a jig there that I showed you how to make. If you've got a bandsaw, this is a really handy jig to have to cut square bits into, I guess, half going from corner to corner. And you really need a jig because otherwise it's quite unsafe. But I will link the video on how to make that up in the right hand corner. So I also bandsawed the top of the head, and I got that big chip out there, so I glued that back in. So I'm going to put a woolen hat on him, and I've left sort of parts on the side to put his hair. So you've always got to think forward in what you're going to do. So I'm going to put hair on the sides. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm sort of like jumping ahead here, but I shaped the actual hat on a big disc sander, and I'm just checking with my thumb on where that headline should go. Sort of I need to round it at the back a little bit more. He's looking pretty good. So I'm using that cutter burr there just to sort of like fine the hat up. So sort of like just looking at the profile of it all, and there's a lot of time spent just looking at the carving. And look who we've got sleeping in the workshop. There's little Minnie there, just relaxing. It's quite hot today. It's like about 30 degrees, and Minnie's trying to find cooler places to lie. So I am putting in a shirt, and I'm just using that cutter burr again just to define. I'll put in a few collars as well, and I put in a woolen hat. I will link the the video on how to do that up in the right hand corner. And you can see me there, I'm actually defining sort of smoothing out the hair with that disc sander that I've got. It works really well for that actually. So now I am sort of like approaching the finish. I don't actually like the hairline. I forgot to take a video of it, but I sort of broke up that hairline sort of going down the face because it sort of seems a little bit too just straight down. So when you're looking at the final images, have a look at sort of like the hairline on that. I'm pretty happy with this carving. It's probably the most realistic carving I've ever done, and it took quite a while, probably a day of carving, and he's looking pretty good. I sort of go over with that disc sander just in little parts, just smoothing out the skin a little bit but not taking away too much detail. Okay, so let's have a look at this finished carving. Now I put a wood wax on, the one that I usually use, and so it's brought out those sort of like lines and all of that and darkened him up a little bit. Looks like he's been out in the sun. So I'm going to put them on the wall as well. So stick around and I'm going to show you how I do that. Put a little bit of white in the eyes. Okay, so when go to stick them on the wall, I'm using a screw and I want to use a drill that's bigger than the head of the screw, that round part at the end. So I'm going to screw it onto the wall, and I'm going to go in first with this quite big drill and just go down a little bit. See kind of how far I'm going in, and it looks actually off to the side, but the body of this man is a little bit weighted to one side, so I'm going a little bit narrower on this one, and I'm going to go up on an angle, just making sure, yeah, that will fit over that screw head. So now I go up on an angle. Don't go too far, else you'll go through the other side. You don't need to go that far actually. And so you can sort of see that going up there. And I want to put in another hole sort of goes around the shaft of the screw. So he's looking pretty good there. So where it is, I sort of just figure out where he's going to be sitting, that screw. So sort of around there. So you can use a Dremel for this part, and I just used a taper burr, and essentially you're just putting in a little groove there for the sort of screw shaft to fit into. And we get a lot of earthquakes in New Zealand, so it's always good to have sort of like a solid kind of attachment to the wall. So that's going to sort of sit in there and won't pull off, but like if you pull it upwards and it will come out. Okay, so hey, thank you all for watching, and if you could hit that like button, that would be much appreciated, and maybe even share the video to people on Facebook or something like that. Yeah, that would be really awesome. Okay, we'll see you in the next video. Bye everybody.